Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to Beecraft Live, as we like to term it. So, thank you for joining us. My apologies for starting a little bit late. We've been having frantic discussions in the background about the fact that I've got a nice red, well, it's actually even not that nice, red checkered shirt, and Claire's the only one wearing the Beecraft blue, which is a shame. So, well done, Claire. Claire wins the brownie points for today. I haven't got the Beecraft blue on at all. So, well done, Claire. Look, on that point, look, let me introduce. So this is Claire Waring, our editor here from Beecraft. So I'll bring Claire in to start with. We've got Margaret in here as well, who's our deputy editor from Beecraft, and then we've got a whole posse of beekeepers over there with Andrew, who's chief executive for the last God knows how many years. Michael Badger, MBE, and tucked away off the back end there, you've got Erica as well, who might make an appearance a little bit later. But look, welcome to Beecraft Live. This is all our discussions about beekeeping, and in this instance, it's all about honey. So look, do get involved, because one of the things that has kicked off a little bit on Facebook earlier on today has been the discussions of what recipes do you like to use for honey. So we've had some bizarre things. Well, my sensible one is honey on toast, which is how I like to have it. We've had people talking about honey and peanut butter together, which I still can't quite grasp. And there's been a whole other, some more, which I'll bring into.
That's dreadful, that.
I know. Can you imagine honey and peanut butter?
I hope I'm not insulting anyone.
No, I did the same thing earlier, but they did say it's the sugar and the salt, and I still can't get it. But anyway, I'm going to bring in some other extra sort of recipes coming on, hopefully as we go on a little bit later on. But look, just to say a little bit about the format of the show, please do put your questions into us here, because we've got some amazing people regarding the world of honey. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to try and share with you how to ask some questions. You'll excuse this because of the way that it's working today. You're going to see about 10,000 of me, which is not good. But you should now see that I've gone onto the Beecraft page. If someone can just confirm that that's happened.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So those of you who are watching on the Beecraft website, you'll probably be looking at it here, and you'll see that we've got the video in here, and you've got this little option here to ask a question. So please do get in here and just pop your question in, which I'll then be able to see and ask. So definitely go ahead and pop some questions to me there, because I will bring them in for you. Equally, I know there's a few of you watching on Google+, so hello to Coach G Moore. I think you've joined us for the first time, which is fantastic. So again, for you guys on Google+, just pop a note in the event stream and we'll bring in the questions. But look, we've had a whole load of things. Now I'm going to kick off with this, which is a sort of a straightforward question. What is honey, and how do bees make it? That was the first question coming in from, who is it, Diane Randall earlier on. So Diane, thank you for getting that question in earlier. It sort of starts us off very, very well. Margaret, what is it? What is honey, and how do bees make it?
Well, it's a solution of sugar and in water, basically. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, got you.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
So the sugars in honey are mainly glucose and fructose, and sometimes there's a bit of sucrose and some other sugars as well. So that's basically it. The water content should be 19% or less, and the rest is sugars. Then you've got mixed in there various flavours that have come from the flowers that the bees have visited. Essential oils, volatile components, that sort of thing. Tiny bit of protein, and that's about it, really.
And you said there about the percentage of water as well. That's obviously an important component of it all, because obviously when nectar comes into the hive, it's a totally different component, isn't it? It's a totally different, I don't know if it's chemical formula, I don't know if that's the right word.
Composition.
Composition, there we are.
Yes.
Can you explain the difference there to sort of how it gets the journey from the nectar into the pollen and what happens there?
So the nectar is produced by flowers, and it has a lot more water in than honey. So it's much, much more liquidy and less viscous, much thinner. The bees bring it back in their crops, and as they do so, they add enzymes to it. So some of the molecules, which are double molecules, for example, sucrose, start splitting in two, and they split by the action of enzymes which the bees have added. For example, sucrose splits into glucose and fructose. On the way home, even, that's starting.
So even in flight, you're saying that this
Yes.
chemical reaction is already happening already.
Yes. And it continues when it's deposited in the cells within the colony.
Okay. And how are they making those enzymes? How is that actually coming about? What's the process? Where does it come from? Is it just naturally occurring in the body? I don't know.
They manufacture the enzymes themselves in various glands.
Clever little things, aren't they, these bees?
Absolutely.
Very clever little things. And one of the questions, I mean, as an extension of that, there was a question about, and this came from Joan, that bees are foraging up to 3 miles away. 3 miles away from a hive in any direction, if I'm correct on this.
Yeah.
And she was, well, actually, the primary question she said is that, and she's thinking in particular of manuka honey. Are there vast manuka plantations where all other plants are destroyed? If so, what happens to the bees when the manuka stops flowering? And I suppose this is quite similar to the almond plantations over in California as well, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, you get an isolation both in time and in geography. So if you have manuka as far as the eye can see, and you pop a beehives in the middle, if the circle that they can fly in is only manuka, then that's all they'll get. But then there's isolation in time as well. So the beekeeper knows when the manuka is flowering and will take their beehives to the manuka when it's flowering, and then they'll take them away again when the manuka has finished flowering. And so that's how they can be sure that the honey is manuka.
I think that's something which we're going to come on to a little bit later about labelling as well. I think there's a big issue, isn't there, about labelling of if you have lavender honey. You can't claim it's lavender unless you can actually prove that it's the only crop within a certain radius. So
Mainly.
There just has to be a majority of that particular honey in it. I mean, it doesn't exclude everything else.
It has to be mainly what's, that you're claiming.
Okay, that's quite a hard distinction, isn't it? That's how do you classify that yours is mainly lavender and mainly?
Well, I'm frantically looking it up what the percentage is.
Okay, I'll leave you to look that up as I answer sort of the next question coming on from Jonas, which is.
Can I just say I have a feeling that that you can do a lot of it with the pollen analysis in the honey, but I'm not entirely sure that that's the only way you do it. But if you have a certain percentage of pollen that has come from, say, lavender, then if the majority of the pollen has come from lavender, then you know the majority is lavender honey, etc.
Okay. Well, Margaret, we'll see if you can.
Be careful with your pollen analysis because some flowers produce much more pollen than others.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are schedules that enable you to work it out so that you equalize out these different levels of pollen in the honey.
Yeah.
In the July issue of Beecraft, there's an article about a company called Minerva Scientific that's actually in Derby, and they can analyse honey to make sure that the main component is what the label says.
The other problem with using pollen analysis is that if you've got, say, a botanic garden down the road, then it shows that you've got sort of eucalyptus honey and things, which is not really the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exotic things can slip in from just the odd garden and, I say, botanic garden and things like that.
God, if only the chance. What an amazing ability to have your beehives right next to a botanical garden. God, that'd be all right, wouldn't it?
Well, the Cambridge beekeepers have their bees right next to the Cambridge Botanical Garden.
Can't beat it. Well, look, let's move on to the other question that Joan had, which was, I think, from what I can understand, Joan, of your question, and please do let me know if it's not the case, but she was saying that if you've got a beehive which is placed, and obviously they're flying for, 3 miles around that hive, if, let's say, there is an oilseed rape field 2 fields away from the hive location, and there's something else in between, which is still going to be very prolific in its nectar production, the pollen production, will they prioritise an oilseed rape field over a field in between which is still producing? I think that's what you're asking, Joan. Anybody got an answer on that?
I think they'll go to both. I mean, I think the majority will go to the crop. I mean, this is just a guess, really. The majority will go to the crop that gives them the best reward, which is not necessarily the one that is closest. So if the rape is yielding better and has a better quality nectar, i.e. got more sugar in it, then a lot of them will go there. But when they're you can see from the pollen in a hive, because they're collecting pollen as well as the nectar, you can see that they're not just working the rape fields. They are working other things as well, and they need a balance of pollen to be healthy.
Okay, so Joan, I hope that sort of answers it. So it is a bit of a mix. I want to move on to the next couple of questions, which we came in from. Oh, sorry, Michael.
There is a slight variation to that, in as much as that it depends on the quality of the sugar in the nectar. For instance, it's known that bees will forsake anything when hawthorn begins to flow, and it's like hawthorn honey to obtain is like angel's visits, very rare, and I've seen them for working more hawthorn than oilseed rape, because there's a very high sugar content that the bees search out, but that's an exception.
Yeah, they'll go the one that gives them the best reward, won't they, Michael?
Exactly, yeah.
So there's maybe a bias towards the higher sugar section that they can obtain.
I would assume
they will always ignore apple in place of oilseed rape. You know, down in Kent, that's why they find it difficult at times for pollination, because the bees really go after the oilseed rape.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's move on to a couple of other questions we had coming in around all about extracting of honey. These actually came in through Facebook earlier on. Two questions here. The basic one was, what is the best time of the year to extract honey? Which is quite open-ended, I would think. But all I know of is, I've always had 2 times of the year to collect honey, one in the May sort of time and one in sort of August into September. Is that general? Are there 2 crops of honey a year, or is it more generalistic than that? Who's going to pick me up on that one?
If you're in an urban environment where there is no oilseed rape, you can leave it on until, say, the end of July, August time. And there's some sense in that, because if we have a touch of really bad weather, at least they've got something there that you don't have to resort to feeding. Now, with oilseed rape, it's though the quality of the rape is much more significant there, you don't get this quite concrete honey that used to get instantly. But it's best really to try and extract the oilseed rape as soon as you're able to. If you can lift it out of lift the comb out of the super, and you can find that it doesn't drip, that is a sign that it wants really extracting. But you really need to test the water content as well, otherwise it could easily ferment. Otherwise you'll end up with it candying, and then you've got to then start using a sort of a Prattley come Easy Bee come, I can't think of the name, a Swinty type melter, and then it becomes a really messy, awful business.
Yeah, if you're going to melt it out, then I really would suggest that you need something with a thermostatic control on the water bath. I wouldn't try and melt out honey on a Prattley tray, because I think it just gets too hot. We actually, personally, we have an Easy Bee, and we do all our extraction when it suits us, well after the end of the season. If small hive beetle comes, we're going to have to change our ways, but at the moment we can store it, and then when we've got the time, we can then put it through the Easy Bee, because that's going to melt the comb completely and separate out the honey and the wax. But as Michael says, for the person who's got the extractor and wants to do it and use the combs again, then you need to extract when the oilseed rape honey is ripe and is not dropping out of the combs when you hold it horizontally and give it a bit of a shake.
Okay, and just for the I suppose the benefit of the people who perhaps aren't familiar with some of the terms that you just used there, Claire, You've talked about an Easy Bee, and was it a prattling board?
No, it's a Pratley uncapping tray.
Prattly uncapping tray, sorry.
It's basically it's just a heated tray that you put your wax onto, and it melts it, and it comes out the end. And you usually use it. I think I've never actually used one, so somebody can probably correct me on this. But it will melt the wax, the cappings wax. But the Easy Bee is more sophisticated, and actually I don't think you can get them now. Well, you can't get them new. You might be able to pick one up second hand. But it has a water bath underneath, and it has a structured bed, so that the honey runs away very quickly and doesn't get hot. Well, not that hot anyway. Don't know what's happened to all this now. I seem to have gone all funny on my... Oh.
No, it's me, don't worry. It's only because what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to... Okay. Can you see that on my image?
Yes.
I think that is what you were talking about there, right?
Now, the best thing about the Easy Bee is the collecting bucket. On this one, it's just coming straight through and through the filter into a bucket. But the Easy Bee, because you're melting the wax and the honey, it has a baffle in the middle and two spouts either side. The wax comes out of one and the honey comes out of the other, because of the different densities of the two liquids. But for most people, they will extract oilseed rape honey, as I say, when it's ripe in the combs, and then, as Michael says, you can leave the main crop honey on for a lot longer. And it does, as he says, gives them a chance to, if there's bad weather, they've got a honey store with you haven't taken it all away.
Okay. Sadly, sorry, I just couldn't bring up an image there to try and make it easy for people to sort of understand, but I think that's relatively clear. Well, I suppose on that is moving on to the other question, which is, and actually before I do that, we had an email in from Councillor Ian Sherwood, all the way from Nerja in Spain. I hope you're having a good time out there. I know you've been looking at some beekeepers today. So definitely do get some photos in. I mean, I'm fascinated to see what they're like. And a shout out, I think it was to Suzanne, who'd been sending in some photos from, was it Greece, Suzanne? I think you sent me over, and some beekeepers up in the hills. And there's some fantastic photos that we're going to look about. And actually, while we're on that, talking about photos here for a second, part of the reason people are starting to send me in a load of photos is that we're now doing what's called Beecroft Photo, hashtag Beecroft Photo, for any of you who are actually in the Twitter and Instagram world. Where we're actually collating once a week the best beekeeping photos from around the world and putting them for all of you guys to enjoy and have a look at. So that's going to be on our website every single Friday under the beekeeping photo tab, and I'll show that a little bit later on. So before I sort of go on, Coach G. Moore, you've come up with a couple of questions. Okay, interesting here. You've put in harvest in July and August. Is that globally correct? It's all over the place. Globally, it's even worse than that, I think, Coach G. Moore, so it's all over.
I think people have got to be sensible. They've got to realise what the season is like in their particular location and act accordingly. I mean, we've been talking about oilseed rape, which is, our particular problem. It's also probably a problem in places like Canada and the States. Don't know where else it's grown, but, it's like the UK, the seasons are so different from Cornwall up to Scotland that you can't say you put your first supers on the 1st of April. It doesn't work like that. You've got to use your common sense. You've got to think about what's going on in your beekeeping area, what your crops are, how quickly they granulate, whether they granulate in the comb or and therefore you need to extract them before they start granulating, or whether they don't granulate very quickly and you can leave them on. I mean, beekeeping, you've got to use a lot of common sense when you're doing beekeeping. Never take it that it's, as I say, it's on this date that you do this and that date you do another thing. It doesn't work like that.
No, it never has done, has it? Ever. All right, look, we talked about extracting honey. Let's talk about some sort of good tips of how to extract honey. Obviously, we're being very general here a little bit, but there's been a couple of questions coming in. So Kevin Howell has asked specifically about oilseed rape honey. We'll come on to others. We've got a talk about some questions about heather coming up as well. So, but we're going to start with oilseed rape here for a second. How can oilseed rape honey be extracted from the comb if it is crystallized? What temperature can it safely be raised to when they're melting the honey away from the wax? Thanks, Kevin Howell. So, I don't know, Michael, are you in a good place to answer that?
We've touched on it earlier by as Claire rightly said, an easy bee is possibly the best thing, or if you're really into it in a big way, buy a Swinty AP melter, which is very, very sophisticated, and it will separate the honey out and the wax into more or less into buckets. Now, the only thing is that you ruin your combs because you've got to, it goes rock hard. But the one thing you've got to be careful with when you're eating honey is something called HMF. Don't ask me to say hydromolecular.
Hydroxymethyl furfural.
That's it. There's always somebody that, without getting too technical, it measures as diastase levels, which the trading standards people are always checking honey because, unfortunately, there are imposters about who add corn syrup to honey and all sorts of things, and they also check to see what it is. Now, heating honey advances HMF rapidly, but normally the ordinary beekeeper, if he doesn't overheat the honey and it's used fairly quickly, it doesn't become a problem. It becomes a problem when you store it for a long, long time in plastic containers. So you extract it in 2015 and store it until 2020. The HMF increases over time. But one of the things that you can do, if you extract it and find that you've got a lot of candy left, this is a little tip to do. Get it extracted, and then each frame on both sides fill them with cold water. In other words, get a bucket, put the frame in it and pour water into the cone, into the cells, and then put it into an empty super box until you've got 11 in it. And then when it's getting dusk, put them on the floorboard of an exceedingly strong colony. And overnight, the bees will take more or less all the soft that wouldn't extract out of those combs, the water that they use to break it down, and they will store it elsewhere. And what is left, if it is rock hard, the only suggestion is to get a spoon and scrape it out. And if you scrape it out carefully, without damaging it, the bees will quickly repair it. And that's something I learnt many, many years ago. But that's about the only thing you can do to avoid melting it down from scratch.
Yeah. Does anybody know if they sell the scrapers that Cecil Tonsley used to have, which he actually made, I think, originally out of a corned beef tin? It was a loop with a straight edge at the front of the loop, and on a handle, and you could use that to scrape the comb off down to the midrib, and you got a straight edge to scrape rather than a spoon. I can remember him using that.
I haven't seen one for years, but Claire's quite right. If you carefully, and then once you scrape it down into another container, and then you could use the comb again, and the bees will draw it out. But it's also good for the bees, because I've found giving bees foundation and combs like that, it acts as a sort of a tonic to them as well. So it's, if you can save them that way, all well and good.
I could perhaps just add, as far as the Easy Bee is concerned, you do end up cutting the comb out of the frame because it will have set. But what we do is we have about an inch starter across the top of the frame. We don't cut it all out. We leave about an inch or put an inch of foundation in. And then the rest of the comb is cut out, and then the frame goes back to the bees, and they build the comb from the starter strip.
I think the answer actually is I think it's simpler than that. I think we should all get the flow hive. And
don't start me on that.
Oh, there are many good things about it, I am sure, but probably oilseed rape is definitely
not one of them.
Not going to be one of them, to be fair. So interested to see what's going to happen with that one. But we should invite them over. We should invite them to say, let's have some oilseed rape flow hives.
I've said that I'm prepared to test a hive, but they haven't taken me up on the offer yet.
Yeah, well, For those of you who are watching this for the first time, we did have a big discussion literally a couple of days after the Flow Hive was released, and I sit on the fence quite a lot because I always like to test things, and I always want to give them a fair crack at the whip. But most definitely with that contraption, if you guys have seen it, you will know that oilseed rape and the Flow Hive, I am not quite sure is going to be a particularly friendly.
Good marriage.
No, I can't imagine it will be. But let me take on another. There's Mike Chappell. Thank you for your questions. You've come in with a couple. And incidentally, for those of you who are just tuning in now, if you're watching this on the Beecraft website and you can see our little video, just above that is the Ask a Question bit. If you want to ask a question or incidentally just pass a comment on what we're talking about, please do, because I can bring it in and we can sort of talk about it as we are live. We're totally live at the moment if you're watching this. So Mike Chappell has put in a question here, which again brings in oilseed rape honey, or I suppose, to be honest, any honey which is totally crystallized. He said, what is the best use? Okay, I'll break this down actually. What is the best use of set oilseed rape honey? That's the first question. Anyone got an answer of the best use for it?
Eat it.
Eat it. Claire and I think alike.
It's an easy one. All right, I'll go on to his subsection of the question, which is, I have extracted approximately 30 kilograms that is now set and I want to bottle it. Should I keep it and use it as seed honey and cream later, or cream and jar it now?
I think
You
that
only need
depends.
a little bit
Sorry.
for creaming.
Oh, this is good.
You only need a little bit for creaming. He wouldn't need the whole lot.
I think the vital thing is how the oilseed rape is set, whether it's set with a fine grain or a coarse grain. If it's set with a fine grain, then he can certainly use some of it to seed future batches of honey. If it's set with a coarse grain, then he wants to find a fine grain and then seed it. Because it doesn't always set one way or the other.
Go onto the internet and look for the DICE method of processing granulated honey. Though it's rather technical, but there is articles on there and it will tell you about the structure of honeys, and using that information you should be able to find a method applicable to what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, so looking up at the DICE method, that's great. So I hope that helped, Mike. And the last question actually Mike's put forward, and Margaret, you sort of touched on this a little bit, was he said also on that note, how do you cream honey correctly? What's the ratio? What's the method? What do you think? What do you use?
I think it depends on whether you or not you are against heating honey. Now, quite a lot of people don't like to heat honey, and I'm one of them. The reason is that whenever you warm or heat honey, you're driving off some of the flavors, the lovely volatile essential oils. So if you want creamed honey without heating it, it is quite laborious. You sit there and you watch telly or something, and you get a very thick spoon and you curl it across the top like a curl of butter. And you get these little curls of honey, and it breaks down the hardness. And one by one you pop them in a jar, and you can then sit the jar in a warm place and it'll all amalgamate down, the air bubbles will come to the top. So just a warm place, for example, an airing cupboard or a sunny windowsill. And that way you're not heating it above, say, 30 degrees, which is what a beehive is anyway. On the other hand, you might not mind heating your honey, and that is a lot easier. And you can then warm either a whole bucket or your jars, which have set, and go a bit higher with the temperature. Then you can stir it. So as you stir it again, that breaks up the stiffness, and it will stay that soft for quite a while, a few months anyway.
Okay. Any others of you got an opinion here on them?
There's another method that if you have, let's say, 10 buckets or 10 units of honey, and you warm them, I can never remember the temperatures, but you can look it up, until it's clear. So you get rid of all the granulation in that honey, and then you warm your seed honey, this nice soft, this nice fine rape honey that you've managed to collect, and you need 1 unit of that. You warm that up until you can stir it round until it's mobile, and then it's a question of adding it to the 10 units and stirring it, distributing the fine seed crystals from your seed honey evenly throughout the liquid honey. You can buy creamers from Thorns, because the last thing you want to do is to get air involved and dragged into the honey. And these creamers, they've got a paddle on the bottom with holes in, so you can move it up and down, and you can mix the honey without actually breaking the surface, and then put it into your storage container or bottle it straight away from there, and then leave it to set off.
Okay, so there we go. So there's 2 or 3 different scenarios you're running there. One of which is not involving heating at all, which is what you've kindly put forward there, Margaret. An alternative you've given as well, and then the 1 to 10 ratio option that Claire's given. Yeah. So that certainly helps. John has actually sent a message through. John Forster, thanks for that. And he says, can you explain? So we're talking about creaming of honey again. Can you explain about creaming of honey? Which I hope we've helped a little bit with that generalised side, John. I extracted some honey a few weeks ago, which was lovely runny honey. It's now white and solid due to rape being amongst it. How do you cream it to make it permanently soft, if you can? But that sounds like it was actually, rape honey in itself, wasn't it? So I suppose he wants to take some of that to now other runny honey to make that creamed honey. Am I right in that assumption?
I think we've covered it, really. Yeah. We've just explained it.
I think if he's got a whole lot of really set rock hard honey, he is going to have to heat it to, unless he wants to, as Margaret says, sit there and curl the bits off the top. Otherwise, I think the only option really is to melt it. But make sure that you've got your seed honey separately, so that you can add that in.
Okay, so John, I hope that helps a little bit. We're staying on this subject of actually preparing honey. We've had another question coming in from Ian. Hi, Ian. It's been a long time, mate. I hope you're doing all right. So he says, I have seen some honey that is set, but after a while, the honey separates with the crystals settling to the bottom, the honey on the top, then ferments. Why is this, and how do you prevent it?
Very simply, is that as it comes out of solution, it releases the water that are in the very minute crystals, and that is what is on the top. And it's a very high concentration of watery sugar solution. It's invariably stored in a warm temperature that allows the natural yeast within that liquid to ferment. The simple way is, as was mentioned earlier, is to warm it up sufficiently and give it a good stir, and then you should stop it separating. It's a problem with lots of honey that have a high levulose content, and it produces a very coarse crystal, and that is the best solution. Is as soon as you've extracted it, to warm it thoroughly for about, as Margaret said, no more than 30 degrees for about 8 hours, and then strain it and store it in bulk, and you'll find that it will not readily separate out.
Okay, so Ian, I hope that answers your question coming. Thanks for that, Michael. That was a great explanation. We had a question in from Steve, and I haven't forgotten you, Steve. Steve Thompson. Don't worry, I'm going to bring that in at the end because it's not directly related in here, but I'm going to try and get onto that one. We've got in here a question from Coach G. Morin from Google+. I was told honey never goes bad. Is that correct?
Depends what you mean by bad.
I suppose it's going off, isn't it? It's sort of that age-old thing that.
What do you mean by going off? If you mean ferment, then yes, honey does ferment, as Michael's just said. If the water content is such, this is why you need to, the bees reduce the water content to 18–19% before they cap it over, so that it doesn't ferment. But if it has too high water content, then the natural yeast, as Michael said, will get going, and that will ferment it. They say that the honey that they got out of the pharaoh's tombs was edible. I sort of wonder about that, but I don't think it's. It depends what you mean by going bad. you know, unless anybody's got any other ideas.
If it's kept in a sealed container, really well sealed, then it won't absorb water vapor from the atmosphere, and it will keep forever. But if it's open to the atmosphere, it can absorb water vapor from the atmosphere, especially in our damp climate, and then it becomes more and more dilute, and then the yeasts start.
The object of heating, you see, is to kill off those yeasts that are present in the nectar, in the honey, and as Margaret says, these yeasts have got to be destroyed, and the heating, if you keep it to the temperature Margaret suggested, below 30 degrees, that will kill off the yeast and it gives it a better chance. But as she rightly said, don't overheat it because you're losing the volatile components, which is what honey is there for, if you see what I mean.
Okay.
I'll just correct you if you don't mind, Michael. Below 30, the yeasts would not be destroyed.
You think not? Oh, right.
No. It would have to go a bit higher. I was trying to find it in my book and I can't find it quickly.
It's about 40, but again, I'm
to kill yeast.
Hopefully that,
it's the only way to kill the yeast, isn't it?
It's much higher than that.
But heating does destroy the yeast.
Oh yes.
Yes, it does, but 30 wouldn't.
Yeah. But 30 isn't sufficient.
Not quite, no. It has to go higher. Can't spot it at the moment.
Okay, well we can leave that. We'll come back to that if you're lucky to find that, Margaret.
Is this the point to say that if you want to stop it granulating, you put it in the freezer?
But it then darkens the honey, doesn't it?
Well, it might do, but it does stop it granulating, which doesn't sound right, but it is right. Anyway, sorry, red herring.
I always like them. That's always good. Look, for those of you who want to ask any questions and comment, or criticisms or whatever it might be, do just click on the Ask a Question button at the top and pop a question in. More than happy to bring it in for all those people who are already asking, which is fantastic. So let me move on to the next bit, which is obviously some of us. I mean, there are some people who just have the honey just purely to enjoy it and stick it on toast, peanut butter and honey. What is that? We had another one. What was it? They like honey, making biscuits with honey, which I think is a fantastic idea. Love all that thing. If you've got a great recipe, do post it in that question box, and I will bring it into the conversation. It's always nice talking about honey. But some people don't want to eat it; they want to show it. They want to go to the competitions and actually show their honey. And Amanda Riley put a question in earlier on saying, "I'd be interested to know more about how to get honey really clear for competitions and or sale," she puts in here, using only the minimum amount of heat. So it's again, we're coming back onto the heat side of things. Michael, and I'm going to embarrass you here. No, I'm going to embarrass myself, I think. Michael, being a BBKA honey judge for the last 37 years, which means you've been judging honey more than I've been alive, which is rather, I don't know if that's worrying or not.
Well, the secret is this, with showing honey, is the only thing that I can say is that if the honey is poor quality, it will not win a show. It's a bit like breeding animals, rubbish in, rubbish out. So you've got to start off with good quality honey. Now, what I found is as well, sometimes beginners do very well because the combs in the brood nest are generally new, and so the honey that comes into the hive, into the brood nest before it goes into the supers, doesn't have too much extraneous matter with it. But when it physically comes to putting it into the jars, what you need to do is remember that when you extract it, you don't use a mechanical machine. You have to scrape it down to the midriff by not incorporating any air into it. So what I suggest you do is get a large, what I used to call a Yorkshire pudding mixing bowl, line it with a double lining of muslin, and carefully scrape the honey into the muslin, but don't, whatever you do, scrape any pollen into it. But also hold the frame up to the light to make sure that you don't mix darker honeys with lighter honeys or vice versa. and scrape them all into there until you get a fair all amount, and then you can put the bowl into a warming box and get it reasonably warm in about 4 hours, and then carefully, and I mean carefully, when it's liquefied, gradually lift the muslin out by keeping it in contact with the honey so that you don't have any dripping to draw the air into it, and have close by another bowl so that you can lift one out into the other, and then cover over the container that's got all this liquid honey so that you don't get any dust dropping into it or anything else. And then what I suggest you do is, with your jars, and this is another thing, is wash your jars in a dishwasher, or if you haven't got a dishwasher, bake them in the oven at the lowest temperature for about half an hour, having washed them well, and they will bring up the jars nearly very bright. And then get a well-worn washed handkerchief and wash the shoulders of the internal part of the glass of the jar, and especially down in the bottom, where between the bottom and the side, that rounded bit, and give it a good polish with a well-washed handkerchief, and then carefully get someone to help you hold the jar and pour in the honey without it, what's the word, incorporating any air, and slightly fill the jar more or less to within 1/8 of an inch of the top of the jar, put a lid on it, and then put it in a nice light window, and every day keep turning it to make sure it brightens it, and then after a day or two have a look and see how you know how it's doing. And if you find lots of air bubbles on there, you can either prick them with a darning needle or get a hot spoon and place it over them, and surface tension will take it off. And that's all you can really do, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. If the honey's not up to scratch, you know, you're onto a loser before you start. So good honey will always outpace anything. You can't improve on it. If the honey's poor, you can't improve on it. Does that help?
Some great tips in there. Absolutely, most definitely. And I really like the idea of popping it on the on a sunny shelf and rotating it around. I'd never heard of that as a technique to brighten the honey.
There is another tip. If you get a saucepan and put what is it called? You know, the side of, say, a super. I can't think of the side bars of a super, and put those in the bottom of a saucepan, and then put the jar of honey that's in there, the jar with the honey in it, and place it on the top of these slats, and then put some really hot water in there, and warm this water up to about 130 degrees. Place in a piece of kitchen, what do you call it, towel and paper over the top, so that nothing drops in, but it also takes the moisture out. It will also force out the any honey that's got slight bits in it to the top, and it will also brighten the honey as well. But it doesn't want to be done for no more than 20 to 25 minutes. And then as soon as you've done that, lift it out carefully, clean the top of the jar with a piece of paper, kitchen paper, and then put a lid on it so that you don't get anything dropping into it. And keep the dog out of the kitchen, or the cat, because as soon as they come in, there's hairs and dust everywhere. Okay,
good. I would fail on the cat. That's the problem. Yeah. The attention to, I tell you what, it's the thing that, and I'm sure anybody watching this or you guys will agree, every single time I go to the National Honey Show, I'm amazed when you walk into the room with all the honey, and I just think it's absolutely fantastic. The different colours, the clarity of it all, and it's quite it's one of my favourite bits, walking in there and just walking down it. It's absolutely
James,
amazing.
the reason why, you see, you've not incorporated any air into it, And by polishing the shoulders and down in the bottom there, light is I'm not a scientist, but it reflect. I can't think of the word I'm looking at. It adds to it and it makes it glisten. So all these little tips make all the difference.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Thank you, Michael. It's great to hear. And I think, Claire, we should just employ you as the adjudicator of all wording. I reckon all difficult words, all long words.
We'll do it together.
We'll have you in. But look, I want to go back because let's just have a look. Yeah, this is all for us actually on the panel because I'm a little bit jealous of this. We've had a message from Pauline, who's very kindly written us a little message saying, just got in about 5 minutes ago and enjoying watching rather than taking part. It's a good one, very interesting. Keep it up. I'll be watching it between finding some eggs and bacon for supper. Thanks, Pauline.
Salivate already.
Yeah, thanks.
Talking about food and honey in food, we just thought I'd mention that in September, Hattie Ellis is going to write about cooking with honey. She's the authoress of a book called Spoonfuls of Honey, which we reviewed in our February issue. So that if people are interested in honey and cookery, then read the September issue.
Fantastic, that's coming out. And then I don't know what this means. Coach Gmore, you're going to have to clarify what on grits means. Heaven knows what having honey on grits is. If anyone can...
Grits are something they have in southern USA. Andrew, you know about grits?
No, I don't think I do.
Well, they were in Georgia, aren't they? Didn't we have grits down in Georgia when we were with EAS? Eastern Apicultural Society.
I'm sorry.
I think they're a sort of... well, I didn't like them very much. They were rather tasteless. I don't know what they're made of, but they're sort of oatmeal-y stuff. I'm not sure. Perhaps she can tell us.
So, sorry guys, can you hear me? Yes, you can. There we go.
Just
I'm back again.
here,
Sorry,
yes.
my computer was frozen up. Did we work out what a grit?
Something oaty by the sounds of it.
Well, I don't think it's oats, but it's
right,
it's that sort of a dumpling-y thing that they have at least down in Georgia, because I know Jennifer Berry was talking about them. It's a southern US thing.
It should be banned. It should be banned, and this whole honey and peanut butter thing. If we took all this care and attention into producing our honey and we put it onto dumpling things, I don't know.
I'm sorry, I'm probably describing them totally wrongly, so hopefully our American friend can actually tell us.
I'll get him to clarify. But look, we've only got we've got 10 minutes left, and I'm very conscious of getting through for a couple of things. Ian Sherwood, thank you ever so much for your feedback. It's one of the most interesting webinars so far. Great help to a member of the Bad Beekeepers Club like me. I'm sure you're not that bad, Ian. John Foster's come back and he says, I've got another question. When they talk about seed honey and fine and coarse crystals, what's the difference in the size of the crystals? Are they meaning sugar size compared to salt grains? Thank you. Anyone care to elaborate on that?
I think you'll know that if you put a bit in your mouth and sort of rub it round, if you can feel the crystals, then they're getting to be coarse. You'll certainly know if it's smooth. You know that if you know the honey that you get from supermarkets and things, that I would say is a smooth honey. So and then you'll know if it's a coarse one because you'll be able to see the crystals in it. But you get the one with the smoothest feel that you can find.
Like toothpaste. That's the sort of consistency you're aiming for.
Yeah.
And people tend to prefer the smooth type of set honey rather than the ones with the coarse crystals. Coarse crystals like granulated sugar.
Mm. Will you describe heather as that, for example?
Read about dice, and that'll give it a better background to it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Dave Moss, thanks for your comment. I can recommend Spoonfuls of Honey. Excellent book, so that's good to know. So thank you for that, Dave.
The best book to find about dice, off the top of my head, is Eva Crane's book, The Comprehensive Guide to Honey. It's out of print, but it'll be in the libraries. It's a fair old 500 or 600 page tome, but there is one section there, about 20 pages, about the dice method, and it's well worth reading.
We might be able to get somebody to write us an article about it for in a future issue of
Well, that's
Beecraft.
a good idea.
Yep, I've already made a note.
Put it in my heather
Okay,
book. It's already in my heather book, Claire.
All right, okay.
Yeah, we have got, Michael's got a heather book coming out, so I'm sure everyone out there will hear about it in due course. So that's coming out. But look, we've had an answer. That is Texas food.
Texas? Well, I've had them in Georgia, I'm sure.
There we are. Look, that is Texas food. Lots of laughs. There we go. No idea, Coach. It still doesn't help me understand what that is. But we never know. We'll find out at some point. Look, let's move on. We've got about 8 minutes to go, and I definitely want to get Stephen's question in because I know he's answered it. So we've got 5 more minutes on this one. There's a question earlier on, which is, I want to sell my honey. What do I need to consider? So I know there are obviously legal ramifications of selling honey as well as sort of practical ones as well. We talked a little bit about labelling. Maybe this is a sort of a more pertinent area to sort of bring in those questions. So how do we sell honey? What do we need to be aware of?
Well, if you type honey regulations into Google, you will get the latest version of the honey regulations. I've got a printout here, and it's sort of several pages long. It tells you the various things you need. But basically, you've just got to producing honey without misleading people. So if you have a label on the front and it says Derbyshire honey, but it's come from Staffordshire, you're misleading people. And there are various other things like that. What's inside the jar has to be honey, pure honey, not messed around with.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else? What about the whole sort of? You've got to have your address on there, haven't you, so people can trace it back to where the honey was. Now, actually, that's a good point. Is it where the honey was bottled or jarred, I should say, or is it where the honey is produced? Anyone know that? I can't remember.
Well, if you call it Derbyshire honey, it has to be produced by the bees in Derbyshire. But you can state that it's a produce of, and then you can say England, something like that, or UK.
Okay. But you've got to have your address on there, I think.
Yes.
You've got to have your name and your address.
I honestly think the best way of labelling honey is to go to one of the equipment suppliers and buy labels from them.
Yeah.
Because they've got all the regulations, they've got to comply with the regulations, and by getting one of their labels, then you do too. So, I mean, that would be my my recommendation.
Easy way of doing it. Okay, right. Let me just bring in, so Nick, thank you, Nick. So Coach has not given us a proper definition, and I'm going to read it out. It says, grits refer to ground corn food of Native American origin that is common in the southern United States and eaten mainly at breakfast. Modern grits are commonly made of alkali-treated corn known as hominy, a bit like semolina. There you go. I learned something new today. All right, look, Mike, the question which came in earlier on from Steve, this isn't necessarily about honey, but I did say, look, do ask anything. Hopefully we can ask in here. So this isn't necessarily. So it's Steve's second year of beekeeping. My 2 hives have this year ended up without laying queens. It's now been 3 weeks without eggs or brood, hopefully with newly mated queens. How long must I wait before I see eggs? Or if I do not see eggs and get laying workers, is there any way I can save these colony without a supply of eggs or brood from another hive?
We've only got 5 minutes left.
I know, how long?
Tricky one. If you look in a colony and you think it's queenless, I normally say wait another week. And quite often you look in a week's time and you see eggs and you go hip hip hooray, all is well. But if the colony's been without brood or a queen for 3 or 4 weeks, you might get laying workers, yes. And you spot those because you'll see multiple eggs, more than 1 egg per cell.
Also, uneven cell surface, comb surface will be all bumpy. I would have said if there is a new queen, then within 3 weeks she should be laying. If you've just got laying workers, then and no means of replacing her, I don't know. I don't think there's anything you can do. If you've got no means of bringing in, fertilized eggs to replace her, or bring a queen in. But bringing a queen into a hive that's full of laying workers is fraught with difficulties.
So, local beekeeping association tapping up some frames of eggs, maybe.
Well, an experienced beekeeper to help, I think.
Okay.
Because until you actually look into the hive, you can't really assess the situation. It's very difficult to do it over the internet.
Over the internet, like this, yeah, absolutely. All right.
Trying to teach my mother how to use the computer over the internet. Anyway, that's
yes, but that was fun.
Yes, it was.
Okay, we had Dave coming in saying, and yeah, funny you should mention this, Dave. I know what you're talking about here. He says, my local supermarket has Manuka type honey for sale, in hyphens. Manuka type honey. It's a travesty, isn't it? What do they say? Something like, is it 1.2 million jars of Manuka honey is produced in New Zealand, and yet 1.7 million jars is allegedly sold. Is that what it is? And that's only in America or something, isn't it?
It's like that, yeah. Yeah.
But Manuka type honey is something slightly different, because Manuka is defined by the activity level, and there are plants elsewhere in the world. I know there's a friend of mine runs a commercial beekeeping operation in Chile, and his honey has been tested and shown to have at least the same activity as Manuka honey. So in fact, what you're seeing in the supermarket could be that they are trying to play on the Manuka name, popularity, but obviously they can't call it Manuka if it's coming from from South America, for instance. But if it has the same activity, then I would guess it could be called Manuka type honey. And there's also other plants in Australia and New Zealand that have the same sort of activity. So it could be one of those.
There you go. So it's not as we seem, maybe. But still, there is a massive disproportionate consumption of Manuka honey versus the amount produced, which is obviously a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, look, so where are we? So it is a couple of minutes to go, and I'm pretty much going to finish on that, I think, because there's been an awful lot of information going through on there. Just to finish off, because it's always nice to sort of bring this in, because I can bring this in and it's not me sort of talking about it, but it's Coach has said, really enjoyed the live OA, love your guest panel, thanks to each. So that's
and thanks to Coach for her questions.
For his questions, yeah. There's good ones in there.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
We've never talked about grit.
We now know what grits are, yes.
and I've had about 3 emails from various people saying this is what they are. So thank you for all of your comments, and it's most fun actually when that all happens. Actually, just give me 1 second. Hang on. I've just realised I'm about to die on my power because I never put in my power label. There we go. I'm back in again. So. For those of you who joined us, thank you ever so much for that. Really, really appreciate it. And if you want to know more, obviously go to bee-craft.com. And next month is going to be a really fantastic hangout again, because we're going to talk about beekeeping photos. In line with us bringing on this weekly article all about the best beekeeping photos of the week. Incidentally, again, if you are producing photos every single week and you want to put them forward to that, we're going to pick the best 10 every single week. So do tweet them, put them on Instagram with hashtag #beecraftphoto, all one word. Or alternatively, just email me them to james at bee-craft.com, and I will bring them into the article every single week and let you know you're there. So next month we're talking about beekeeping photography. Claire's going to be joining us. Simon Crosland's going to be joining us. A couple of American beekeeping photographers are going to join us who are very big on the Instagram front, and that should be quite interesting to sort of give you some tips and tricks about how to take photos of the bees that we all know and love. So on that note, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you for Pauline, who no doubt is now tucking into eggs and bacon. Not very nice.
It's hangouts on the 15th of July. Just
15th of July then, so 8 o'clock this time, so that's great. And obviously, yeah, as we said, more information, do check out bee-craft.com, and we can go from there. And Coach, yes, we do ship to the USA, so hopefully that'll help as well. Lovely. Thanks ever so much, everybody, and see you next month. Bye.
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 Bye.